What's good, Illini Nation? It's your man in the middle, Deon Thomas, and as always, bringing you nothing but the very best. And today is no exception. I mean, we have, you have Hall of Famers, you have great writers, you have great storytellers, and then you have men like the great Loren Tate, where he is all of those things combined in one. So he has covered me. He has covered many before me and will cover me and has covered many after me. So we are going to pick his brain and have some fun today on Champagne on Ice. And of course, the Champagne on Ice is brought to you by the Field of 68 Media, as well as our friends over at Bet River Sportsbook. So Loren, welcome,
yes, sir.
My friend. Thank you for joining me today.
I'm looking forward to it.
Normally this is the other way around. I mean,
right.
You're pulling me on calls, and now I finally get to pull the great Loren Tate on my podcast. You have no idea how exciting this is for me.
Well, I think it's more exciting for me because I don't know what we're going to talk about, but it's going to be fun.
Well, you know what, Loren? I mean, because I tell people I love talking to people that have more experience than me, whether it's in my profession or whether it's in life, because I use the frame a walking encyclopedia. And this is what people with more experience are. And you have that experience. I mean,
the trouble is some of the pages dropped out along the way.
And that's okay. Because you still got
isn't this a weird time? Do you realize who the number one team could be next week in the NCAA? Can you realize who it could be?
Who? Purdue?
It might be Auburn. It might be Auburn.
Oh my gosh!
And I don't know who the coach at Auburn is. I can't remember who the coach is, but anyway, it could be Auburn.
Oh, trust me, I know who it is. And it is he who shall not be named, because there's no way in the world that guy should ever be the number one team in the nation. Love his kids. He always does a great job recruiting. But man, there are ways that you do things that that there are ways that people should do things and carry themselves in life. At least that's why I was always told.
We'll leave that for another time.
Exactly.
Okay.
And to reward those that do not, I have a little bit of an issue with that. But as you said, we'll leave that for another topic, another discussion. But Loren, I mean, we were having a short discussion, and I found out that I have my facts wrong about Coach Henson's arrival to campus.
Well, we didn't know who was going to be named until he was actually named at the press conference. Nobody knew. And Lou had been kept, nobody had seen him in town or anything. So this was a surprise, but I had met Lou earlier at a luncheon with Harv Schmidt, because as I mentioned to you off air, Harv Schmidt coached at New Mexico, University of New Mexico, as an assistant coach there, and came to Illinois as the head coach. And of course, he had all that New Mexico background. Lou was at New Mexico State, so they had known each other there. So when Lou came to the state to visit, he came to see came to see Harv, and then the three of us went out to lunch that day. Is all I remember. We just talked basketball. It was the time, it was the era of UTEP and the Texas Western team that had won a couple of years before. And it was just, there were a lot of things to talk about. And Lou had integrated Hardin Simmons a few years before that. We knew about those things. And yet we didn't know actually that Lou was going to be the head coach, because he had been athletic director at New Mexico State as well as basketball coach. Wow. And that fact that he was athletic director he had contacts with a lot of people through that, and that's how he came to be the head basketball coach. It was the contacts that he had made through as athletic director.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, for those out there in the Illini Nation, I'm sure you know, but there may be some younger listeners that may not know who Harv Schmidt was. Harv Schmidt was a former player and coach from Kankakee, Illinois, but he was a former coach at the University of Illinois leading up to Coach Henson's time. Back during the 50s and early 60s, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so, was a heck of a coach. from what I've heard.
Well, he was until he had problems, and he had, he had one. He never beat Purdue was his problem. When he came in with Rick Mount. Rick Mount was the star at Purdue with Keller and some other players on that team. They were a Final Four team. Purdue was, and Illinois just couldn't beat them. And one year, well, they came close, but they never got it done. And ultimately, there was a breakdown, and he had some problems with some black athletes during the end of his career. And that was what there was around 1969. There was a lot of problems in that regard, and black athletes were breaking in at that time. They were becoming stars, and some were. We had Billy Morris, who was here 1 year and left and went to St. Louis. We had Chris Berryman, who was here 1 year and then a couple of years later committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
And he was from Chicago, and there were just some. We had the slush fund, that Harv inherited, and so it was just upheaval in that whole period in the '60s, all the way through '69. But when Lou came in '75, that all changed, and Lou rebuilt the program all the way up through the 1980s.
Well, like I know, during the 60s and early 70s, not just on college campuses across the nation, but there were, in society itself, there was a lot of racial tension. So
Vietnam War played a part of that too.
Yeah, the first time I heard about, of course, the so-called integration of having players on campus, of course, was with Texas Southern, Texas Western. But then I found out through my conversations with Coach Henson that he had done it really first, as you mentioned, at Hardin-Simmons, in integrating their athletic department. And he told me, he was like, Deon, I told him I wasn't going to take that job unless I was able to do this. And that's one of the great things about Coach Henson. So him landing on campus, having done what he did there, do you think that's part of the reason he was possibly hired at Illinois?
Cecil Coleman really believed in Lou. Cecil was the athletic director at the University of Illinois at that time. As I said, they had met repeatedly at conference meetings as athletic directors, and he believed in Lou in that regard. I don't know beyond that. I just know that Cecil was high on Lou, and Cecil made the decision.
Yeah, because I can tell you this, when I heard what Coach Henson had done, I mean, I already had a ton of respect for him, but that respect jumped 100-fold when I heard what he had done down at Hardin-Simmons, and of course coming to the University of Illinois, and some of the issues and things that have gone on at Illinois in the past. But knowing that Coach came in there and really, as you said, righted the ship, and he started this off with a couple really good players that he recruited, bringing in a couple of really good black athletes.
Well, he got Levi Cobb to come out of Chicago. That was kind of the beginning, and it worked from there. And of course, in 1989, he had all all Illinois players. There wasn't a single player on that team that wasn't from the state of Illinois. Isn't that amazing? When you look at it now, and you look at all the teams we play, they're from France, they're from Japan, they're from every place in the world. We got all kinds of guys from Puerto Rico. I mean, it's amazing how that's changed. And really everything has changed for me pretty dramatically, because when I came here, when I enrolled at the University of Illinois, we had virtually all Illinois players at that back in the 50s, all the way through. If you go back through, and I did this, I went through nearly 100 years of basketball, and for the first 80 years or so, it was just dominated by in-state players, and that's changed so much now. And when we get I think next year, how many Illinois players will we actually have? Rogers is now at Thornton Harvey. He's a recruit we got coming, but he's not really an Illinoisan, I don't think. He just came in this year to Thornton to play for Ty Streets there. Yeah. But in any case, it doesn't matter anymore where players are from. And at the time during the Harry Combs, during the Doug Mills, Harry Combs, Lou Henson eras, it was all Illinois.
And
With a
that's
few
one of
exceptions.
the fascinating things, because you can fill out a roster just from this state alone. I mean, that's how deep the talent is, whether you go from the north up in Chicago all the way down to the tip of the South in Cairo. You can find talented players, especially at that time and during my era, that could definitely play at the Big Ten level. I think that's probably dropped off just a little bit now, but the game has become so global and so national with AAU and things of that nature. What do you think? Do you think that's a good thing, or
No,
what's your opinion?
I think loyalty is a good thing. But I look, it starts way before they get to college. You just saw, uh, we had a player from Joliet that went to Lamalier. I may not be pronounced, LaPorte, Indiana. And what we're seeing now is really star players moving out of their high schools and entering these, what I call these basketball schools.
Yeah.
And Fierce was we had a player from Joliet named the name of Fierce that just announced for Michigan State. Illinois was recruiting him, but he had already left the state.
Did he really? I missed that.
Yeah, he committed. He committed to Michigan State. It came down to Illinois and Michigan State, and Izzo sold him, and that's where he's going. Now Illinois has got two good guards coming, but neither one. The first two guards that are coming were not from the state of Illinois.
Right.
And Rogers, who is at Thornton, is, I don't know if I call him a guard. He's a wing. He's 6'6" or 6'7", and so you could call him a guard if you want to. But I mean, he's basically he's going to play next year. I'll tell you that. He's really good.
Yes, he is. Yes,
Quality player, and he's the best. Well, I shouldn't say he's the best, but he may be the best recruit that Illinois will have coming in this year.
Well, I've seen him play. I haven't had the opportunity to see the other two guys play as much. And Ty Rogers is a handful. And this is a kid that, I was talking to Coach Underwood the other day, and he said that I mentioned Trent Frazier to him. And he said Trent Frazier is everything that this program is.
Mm-hmm.
The hard work, the everyday guy mentality, sacrificing, stepping up when necessary. I believe, and I haven't gotten this from Coach, but I believe after watching Ty play, I think that young man fits perfectly in the mold of what Brad Underwood is looking for.
Well, you've seen two guys that really jumped up this year. I think one would be Davis at Wisconsin and Murray from Iowa, and he's in that category, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, he's got that kind of potential. That doesn't mean he's going to do it. He's got to do it, but he has the potential to be that kind of player.
That he does. Well, LT, let me go back to you, because this is a conversation about you. What got you interested in journalism? I mean, and not just interested, because this has to be a passion and a love and all of those, cute little explanatory words that we like to use, because you've been in this position and doing this job for a very long time.
It's all happenstance. When my dad died when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and my mother married a man by the name of Daryl Tippett from Monticello, and he ran the newspaper over there. So I was in the newspaper business from the time I was 12 or 14 years old, and involved around and watching, and went to journalism at the University of Illinois. So, and then of course I played sports. So the combination of journalism and sports just kind of fell together. I was on the freshman team, basketball team, and I was on the baseball team at Illinois, and I knew all the players. I hung around. I was a roommate of Don Sunderledge in 1951 when he was the MVP of the Big Ten, and They went to the Final Four, and so Sunderledge had a big impact on me, and I've been around sports ever since. I mean, I just never left it.
Wow.
I spent 11. I came back from the Army. I played in the Army, by the way, and I was on the Fort Monmouth team, and came back to Monticello, and was going to work for my dad. And then I got an offer from Hammond, Indiana, a former Illinois graduate. John Whitaker contacted the News Gazette, says, "Is there anybody down there? We need somebody desperately. We just lost Jim Schofield to he went into another business and left the sports writing. He needed a sports writer. And so T.O. White from the News Gazette called me and says, do you want to go up and apply for that? So I did. I applied, got the job, and I spent 11 years in Hammond. And,
wow.
And Hammond, Indiana. And then I had applied for the job in 1963 here and didn't get it. And then when it came open again in 1966, I applied again and got it before anybody else actually was interviewed. I was offered the second job in 63, and then I was given the sports editorship job in 66. And that's wow. how I got here.
So in the family business, did you start off delivering papers?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, I delivered the News Gazette. I definitely, yeah. We had. I was a paper boy, absolutely, and of course I helped my dad, and I wrote my first sports column for my dad. It was called Tate by Tate.
And he's in marketing, ladies and gentlemen. And he's in marketing. Oh, I love that. Tate by Tate. So you have really learned basically almost every aspect of the business.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you when I learned. I came to the University of Illinois in the fall of 1966, the very beginning of the football season, and within, let's see, by December, the slush fund hit. Mm-hmm. And of course, ultimately we lost Harry Combs, Howie Brown of the basketball team. We lost, the coaches. Pete Elliott and his staff were he had to resign over some money that they had given players for monthly, like Rich Jones got like $50 a month. I mean, there was a time when the Big Ten denied any outlay of money to players, whereas the rest of the nation could give 25 or 50, or I can't remember the amount now, but it wasn't much, but they were able to give a few bucks to athletes during that time, and we were matching that. And then we went in excess in some other areas where there was a pregnancy involved, in which there was a lot of money involved, and there were a lot of things. Illinois got caught with their pants down, and they lost, and that really set Illinois back in 1966 and 67. And of course, that's when Harv came in to succeed Harry Combs, because Harry was fired basically, and Harry was a tremendous coach. He had 3 of his first 5 teams that he coached at the University of Illinois. 3 went to the Final Four.
Wow. Wow.
Illinois was really good.
I mean, it's hard to get to one. It's almost impossible to get to one Final Four, and you got the 3 in that short period of time.
Yeah. There's only been 2 since then, 89 and 2005.
Yeah, exactly. That says a lot. Well, we know the brilliance of Coach. I mean, they don't name 2 floors after you at 2 different universities, and you become their all-time leader in wins at 2 different universities if you're not good at what you do.
Yeah, Harry was a special guy. He was from Monticello, and he had a tremendous record at Monticello, and then an unbelievable record at Champaign High School. I think they were in the state finals like 3 consecutive years, right before he came to Illinois. He had Ted Beach and Fletcher and those players that were all-stars at Illinois as well. Fletcher actually received some All-American nomination. Of course, Ted Beach, who's still around these days, and see Ted all the time. He played golf again last summer. He's a fanatical golfer, and I think he must be in the 93 area, something like that. About 93, I think. I'm not sure. Wow.
So you hold on. Now we got to touch on your because we were in the back one day in the media room eating, and I heard you say that you had just hung up your cleats from playing softball.
Well, I played ball a lot of years. I know that the last thing I did before I came to Champaign, and this is kind of like bragging, but I was in the national tournament out in Wichita, and I pitched a game against Alabama, and we won the game, but I had to come out in the 9th inning. I was getting in trouble, and we won the game, I think 4-2. But that was the last time I pitched And I was about 35 years old at that time. And I came back to Hammond, wrote a goodbye column in Hammond and a hello column in Champaign for the same Sunday.
Well, there you go. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that don't know, Loren was a great softball player and all-around athlete, and now just hit 90, and he's just now hanging up his softball cleats.
A couple of years ago, I
want to be like you when I grow up, Loren.
Well, I tell you what, I wanted to keep playing about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago now. And the team decided they wanted to win, and that kind of eliminated me.
See, that's when for the elder statesmen, they need to change the rules. You're allowed to have at least one person in a specific age group on the team.
Well, it was.
I think that works. No,
we had a lot of old players. We didn't have anybody as old as me. I tell you, one of the best teams I played on in the old men's league was when we had Lon Kruger at shortstop and Andy Dixon. We had two of the best infielders. I mean, I remember playing first base when I couldn't hardly handle it. So that Lon could really throw.
Really?
Pitcher in the Cardinal. He signed as a St. Louis Cardinal pitcher.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but he didn't stay in the minors long. But he had a great arm.
Well, I think he found a pretty good profession.
You bet.
After that other one.
He was a really good coach, wasn't he?
Oh, he's a great coach. Great coach. Well,
I looked it up the other day. I don't remember the exact numbers. I think he lost twice to Bobby Knight, and I think he beat him like 6 times. Something like that. I may those numbers may not be perfect, but he won most of his games against Bob Knight.
And that says a lot. That says a lot. I mean, we both know how special Coach Knight is.
Well, yeah.
It was, especially when he was at Indiana. But to have the upper hand or hold the upper hand on a Bobby Knight coach team, you better have been pretty doggone good. Not just as a coach, but had some horses on the court as well.
Yeah. Well, I thought Lon put together some really good Illini teams. He won a Big Ten championship with 5 seniors one year. Remember that team with Turner and the 2 Johnsons, and they maximized what they could do.
They did, because at the end is when Brian was a freshman my senior year.
Was he?
So it's so funny. He tells this joke all the time. He's the only player in University of Illinois basketball history to earn 2 scholarships. So when he first said that to me, I looked at him. I'm like, "How you earn 2 scholarships?" He was like, "Oh yeah, mine and Lucas's." He's like, "If it wasn't for me, Lucas wouldn't have a scholarship either." Picking on his younger brother. But so LT, you meet Coach on campus. You start to, of course, cover him in his first years. Those first years were hard, and I know how difficult. You and your job, you have to be both honest, but at the same time, you have to get the story. How was that pressure on you? One, having known Coach before he got to campus, known the things that he had done, of course, before he had gotten here, because he was successful before he got here. And then in the beginning, it doesn't start off well. How does that sit?
It's a tightrope. I mean, but it's different then than it is now. There weren't so many people involved in the coverage of the team in those days. I mean, there were just a few of us. And the one thing that made it easy for me in covering Lou is that he never lied to me. He would always tell me the truth, and he would tell me things. Now, look, you can't repeat this, but this is what the situation is, or about recruiting. I mean, I remember when Jared G, the morning that Jared G announced he wasn't coming to Illinois, and we thought, well, that's a big loss, because Jared was a really good player. And then, of course, that whole thing changed within 24 hours. It was kind of amazing. He wasn't coming, and he was. And we had it work the other way too, where where players were coming and then just changed their mind. I think Cross told him he was coming, the great center from Chicago. You remember? And the next thing we know, he was going to Purdue.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's
Russell Cross.
Yeah, that's the coaching world. That's college recruiting. So you're walking this tightrope. You're unable to share some of the inside stuff that coach was giving you. But I'll tell you this, Loren. I always found and thought that your articles, and I this is where with you I kind of broke my high school coach's long-standing rule, which he would always tell me, Deon, don't read the newspaper. He was like, because one or two things are going to happen. He was like, either you'll believe what they say if they're saying good things and you won't work as hard, or you'll believe what they're saying bad things and you won't work as hard. He's like, so either way, just don't read it. But I read your articles, and I always found them to be sometimes a little scathing, but never derogatory or personal. Would you agree with that?
Well, I hope so, but I let me tell you that when I came here, when I arrived in Champaign, I told you the last thing I did was I pitched in a national tournament. I was a jock. I mean, there was nothing, I didn't have any intention of ever writing anything bad about Illinois. Mm-hmm. I attended Illinois. I loved Illinois. I was a close friend of Harry Combs. One little story, I got injured when I was a junior, and we were playing in the tournament over here in Urbana, and I had a really bad injury to my ankle. I was laying there on the court, and they had to carry me off. And the first person in the locker room was Harry Combs. This is a high school game. Harry happened to be at the game, and he and I played golf together when I was a kid.
Wow.
He'd come home in the summer, and they didn't recruit like they do now. I mean, he had time to spend with his mother. His mother cooked many of my meals for lunch. His brother ran a pool hall in Monticello. So what I'm trying to tell you is that I was a jock, and mentally, and then the slush fund hit, and all of a sudden I had to wake up. And we had other incidents that happened along the way, cheating, which Illinois was called on. And so by the time you arrived, I was a different person than the one that had been a total jock before. And I tried to do things the best I could. And I was always walking the tightrope because I was also doing color. I was doing color in football on the radio broadcast and color on the basketball broadcast. And so, you just try to do the best you can. And when things go bad and somebody gets in trouble, you have to report it. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky that I didn't get booted off sooner than I did. I was on the plane with the team until John Gross got here.
Oh wow!
And by the way, did you see the game that John Gross won last night? By the way, Akron,
no, I didn't.
They are 10 down with 2 minutes to go. 10 down with 2 minutes to go, and scored the last 11 points and won the game.
Good for him. I still talk to Coach every once in a while. I mean, one of the best people I've ever met. He and his wife, just great people. Just didn't,
he got a good one last night, boy. He won a thriller.
Good for him. I'm gonna have to shoot him a text and tell him congratulations on that big win.
It's unbelievable. I mean, you can't come from 10 down. I mean, a 10-point lead with 2 minutes, that's safe, isn't it?
Oh yeah, you feeling pretty doggone good about that one. But I mean, and that's one of the things I say. I mean, yes, it was always truthful, it was always honest, it was always on point. And I always enjoyed your articles. So I just wanted to say that.
I'm glad you did, because a lot of people don't.
Of course not. If everybody agrees with you, LT, then something's wrong.
That's right. Well,
my mother used to always say, you'll never make everybody in life happy, so don't even try. You tell the truth and you keep it moving.
That's right.
So, all right, LT, I got to ask you this. Again, those first few years with Coach was not great. He started the Orange Crush.
Yeah.
The first student group in the country. What were your thoughts when that happened? Did you think, oh man, this guy is a visionary, or this is nuts?
I didn't know what was going on. I mean, he was meeting with these students in his home, and I wasn't aware until later what was taking place. I mean, I didn't know. I don't remember him talking about it. Maybe Mary might have mentioned it, but I don't have a great recollection of that. I just know that once it got rolling, some people picked up the ball and ran with it. And he needed that because he had to, I mean, he couldn't do it himself. He had to get the students organized. And they had about, I don't know, they maybe had 10 or 12 students involved in the beginning. And then it built from there.
Wow,
You know,
yeah.
it's a tremendous thing now.
I'm sorry, say again. Go ahead.
Well, it's a tremendous, I mean, that turnout for the Purdue game was, they had everything going, didn't they?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And the crazy thing about that is we didn't even have all the students back on campus. I mean, school wasn't
been a bunch of them there, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So a whole lot of guys, a whole lot of those kids from the Crush and everything else came back for that game. But it has become such a tradition.
Yeah.
The Orange Crush and just the things that they do in the community, the scholarships and things that they've started to hand out, the work that they do in the community, volunteering, and all of this was because, you know, Coach Henson got this thing going, and now everyone else in the country has a student section.
Yeah, I'll say. I don't think we were first necessarily, but we certainly were among them. Yeah, it's the turnout. Illinois has become and has long been a basketball community. This is a basketball community, more so than football.
Thank you, LT. Thank you. I keep telling people that no knocking on Illinois football. I love them, of course, but Illinois is a basketball school. You know, people tell me I'm biased when I say it.
Well, I realized it once again when I was at the Arizona game. I mean, that was the greatest atmosphere. I don't know when I've been around better atmosphere than that.
You and me both. But before we move on to the next, let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up yet with Bet Rivers, now's the time because they are offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. With basketball season in full swing, get in the action by going to betrivers.com today or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. Must be 21 years or older. If you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLERS. Well, we're sitting here, ladies and gentlemen, with the Hall of Famer, Loren Tate, talking life and talking basketball. So now we've gone through some of those past teams. I got a couple of questions for you, LT, and I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Good.
All right, because you have covered so many of the successes and let's just say it, and failures at the University of Illinois. But if you had to put together, let's say, a top 5 list of best teams.
Best teams. Okay.
Yes. Who would they be?
Well, I would take 89 and 2005 in that order. And that's the problem because we know that the players are better today than they were before. Mm-hmm. But that team had Larry Smith and Liberty coming off the bench. And I just think that they had more talent. The league was better then. There were more good teams then. But the 2005 team only lost one game in the Big Ten, and that was the final game. And they were number 1 in the country for a long time, and that was not true of the 89 team. The 89 team lost 4 games in the Big Ten. But part of those, I think all of them, as a matter of fact, were when Gill was out.
Yeah, they were.
So anyway, I'll start there. Now, we've got a real problem going beyond that because I'll take you all the way back.
Please.
And if I do that, I think the 51 team that lost by 2 points to Kentucky was a tremendous team, but I knew all those guys. They were my classmates. And it was a time when, you know, if you brought Johnny Red Kerr out to play against, and Kerr played in 52, not 51, and they went to the Final Four in 52 as well. But if you brought Johnny Kerr out to play against Kofi pushed him around. Yeah. Johnny was tall and skinny and had a nice hook shot and a very good touch, and had a wonderful pro career, by the way. Yes, Johnny Kerr had a great pro career before he became coach of the Bulls. But I just think that I'm just saying that the 51 team was special in that era, and then you have to go up to Bill Self teams in the early 2000s when they had the three guys in Peoria, when they had Griff and they had McLean and Frank Williams. Frank Williams is a tremendous player, the MVP of the league.
Mhm.
But I would maybe I would push that team ahead of the 51 team. But the 51 team was pretty good. And they had Sunderledge, who you can't imagine since you weren't here, but Sunderledge was the D Brown of that era. I mean, everybody loved Sunderledge. He was only 6 feet tall, but he was unstoppable. You couldn't get in front of him. I mean, he could. I'll tell you a little story. I thought I was a good shooter, right? So I joined the fraternity and I told Sunderledge, I said, listen, you and I tell you what I'll do. I'll play you 10 games of pool and I'll play you 10 games of shooting baskets over at. So we walked across to Huff and I didn't win a single one. He won every game, just shooting.
Wow.
He made everything. I made most of them. He made them all. And then we went back and played pool. And
I would say, did you win the pool? Did you win that?
I swept him at pool. So we broke even. It was $1 a game, and he won 10 over there, and I won 10 at the pool table. I was a card shark. I mean, I was a pool shark in those days. That's all I did was I lived in the Combs Pool Hall in Monticello, and I played for money all the time, and I held the record over there for 3-rail billiards for a long time. I don't know. I'm sure it's been since broken, but anyway.
3-rail billiards? What's that?
Billiards is a game where you don't have any pockets, okay, and you have 3 balls on the table, and you have to hit 3 rails. In other words, before you hit the second ball.
Okay. So you were never shooting like I played 8 ball. I played 8 ball. I played 9 balls.
8 balls got
shooting directly at.
You're talking about a table with pockets,
right?
And a billiard table has no pockets.
So you have to hit 1, 2, 3 rails and then hit one of the balls.
You have to hit. Well, yeah, you can start out, but you can hit the first ball, and then you got to hit 3 rails before you hit the next ball.
That sounds even more difficult.
It is difficult.
All right, LT. Well, I know not to play 3-ball billiard with you then. Thank you.
I haven't played in so long, I wouldn't know which end of the cue to hold.
So 89, 05, toss up between 51 and say 01, since we just recognized that team for being a Big Ten championship. What would be the 5th? Yeah, pressure, LT. You in the hot seat, baby.
You got me because I haven't thought about this. Let's see. I'm going to have the Whiz Kids.
Okay, I can see that.
I mean, gee, I should have put them in sooner. They were before my time.
Well, there you go. But see, being a journalist, the great thing is you get to go back and check up on those guys as well. So now I'm going to make your seat even hotter, especially since you're sitting on here with the all-time leading scorer. Your top 5 players.
You told me, by the way, that you're better than Brian Cook. Is that right?
Of course.
Okay.
I love Cook to death, but LT, I'd have killed him.
I would say I'm going to start with Harper and Nick Anderson, and the best center that Illinois ever had based on what he accomplished in a career would probably be Kerr, but that's just so long ago. And Thoreen had the best numbers, but they were scoring 100 points a game. I mean, they were shooting 100 times. Harry's goal was to shoot 100 times. They didn't often do it, but they'd shoot 80 or 90 times in a game.
Wow. And
so that's why all those rebounds, I mean, if you'd had that many rebounds, opportunities, just think of all the rebounds you could have gotten. Yeah. And Thoreen was a good rebounder. He was really good, but the points were altogether different. The defense was different in there. I mean, they didn't play defense the way they should have.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll throw Deon Thomas in there real high. Maybe.
Well, thank you.
I think you belong in the top 5.
I appreciate that.
You know who was really good? Was a really good player was Snake.
Yeah. Yeah. Ken Norman was one of my favorite players when he was coming out, when I watched him when he was at
Had a very
Illinois.
high percentage. He rebounded. He was a good player, and he was a good player in the NBA too.
Yes.
Long,
He's one of those players I don't think gets enough
right?
appreciation for what he did, not just in college, but also at the pro level as well.
But when you throw something out like this at me, and I think I'm going to tell you the most underrated player is Kewan Garris. Most underrated. I'm not saying he's the best five in the top five, but I'm just saying, wasn't he underrated? Bruce Douglas was a tremendous player, but not a shooter. True. I mean, he was a total player, but he wasn't a good shooter. He wouldn't have had any advantage by the 3-point shot because he didn't shoot from that far out anyway.
Right.
He just didn't. And sometimes people would drop all the way back to the free throw line guarding him.
Oh wow.
That happened.
That's a complete disrespect for who you are as a player. Wow.
But he could really distribute the ball. Tremendous on defense. He got a lot of steals. He got a lot of assists. He was a leader on a team that won the Big Ten championship in 1983 or 4. And
he's still sitting there with the all-time leader in steals and assists, if you can believe that, boy.
Yeah. Well, he had 4. Here's the difference between a lot of the players that we're talking about. Some play 4 years. Some are now playing 5 years or more. Yes. And you go back to a guy like we talked about, Ken Norman. He only played 2 years. He played in junior college, and one of the greatest practices that were ever held at the University of Illinois were when he was ineligible and he was playing against Battle. He would team up against Battle in practice.
I would have loved to have seen that. I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah, that was something else. But again, I'm sure I'm leaving out a lot of players, and we've had 3 or 4 that we had. Sunderland, MVP of the league. We had Sunderland, we had Kerr, we had Williams, we had Dawson. Am I missing somebody? And Desumu? Who? No, that was. He didn't get it last year, did he?
No. They gave it to Luca Garza.
Some guy from Iowa got it, I think.
Yeah. That other big guy that he should not have gotten it, but yeah.
But was there ever a greater closer than Desumu?
No, not that I have seen. Not that I have seen at Illinois.
You were in the final minute of the game. What player of Illinois do you want to be on the court?
Oh, him. I want the ball in his hands. I mean, and that's what that kid did in the 3 years he was at the University of Illinois. I don't think there's a player, definitely not since I've been following them. I've been following and watching them since the mid 80s. I don't ever remember anyone as a closer like him. I mean, I've had guys call me and say, man, they're talking about putting his number in his jersey in the rafters and and mine isn't there. And I'm like, because his deserves to be there. There has not been a player that has transformed our program like that kid did. And, 1, staying in state, coming to Illinois, 2, what he did and how he performed on the court, and Coach Underwood said it all the time. I don't know what happens with Coach Underwood if he doesn't have an iota sumo. I mean, what he did.
You know what? He would have probably turned to somebody named Trent Frazier.
Yeah, that's true.
Boy, he's been good. He's been good late, although we're not talking about the final shot, but in the final minutes of games now, he's been real dominant.
Has been lights out and has been since he was a freshman. I mean, we all know he was like a light switch, man. I mean, Trent can turn it on and give you buckets at any time, and then, be your best defender on the court as well.
Let me ask you something. How's this team going to change now that Curbello's back? This team.
I'll tell you this. I can't put this team on paper. I would put this team in this top 5 that you just named on paper. They are not there yet, and they're a long way from being there. But when he is on the court, and you can see the change in that Purdue game, when he came into the game and he played within himself and not tried to be the man on the court, he changes everything for this team. He changes the ability to put the ball in the basket. Everybody has to pay attention to what he's doing, because he can either score, He can set up something inside or he can set up something outside. So what happens? I don't know how once they work him back into the lineup. I think how far this team goes and how much it changes is how much he understands he needs to play within himself and not try to be.
You're talking about the offensive end of the court, which is crucial. But let me tell you what I worry about. As long when you've got Frazier and Plummer and Curbelo in the game defensively, are we going to be good enough? That's my question.
I think if we can clean up, because Alfonso Plummer's been really good on the ball. He's had some struggles off the ball. This game against Purdue. I mean, the back doors were all on him.
Back door twice. Really hurt.
And yes, they killed us. Those three things. But I think if he gets into video and he understands I can't be watching the game, I have to be playing the game. I think that's correct, that we can correct that. And I think he's strong enough physically to be able to defend guys that are bigger than him, and he's good enough on the ball and moves his feet well enough. Now, my concern is, Trent's going to be fine. I'm not worried about him, whether the guy is bigger or smaller. If we can get Plummer to cut out the mental mistakes on defense, which he had been really solid up into this last game, then I think he will be fine. Andre Curbelo is just small, and let's just be honest about it. He's not physically going to push anyone anywhere. He's not going to those things. So you take him and you put him on the worst scorer out of the guys that are on the perimeter, and I think those other two guys will hold up. So as long as he's not giving the ball to other people by turning it over and having 7, 8, 9, 10 turnovers a game, I don't believe he hurts us from a defensive standpoint. But I think he definitely helps us from an offensive standpoint if he plays within himself.
You mentioned strength, and I'm sure you can explain what it means to be strong on the post, because seldom do we see Kofi back down the way Edey did that the other night. I thought that was very concerning to me, because we had the same had the same disadvantage there for a while that we normally have as an advantage in against everybody else. But Edey really hurt us. I mean,
Edey killed us. He's gotten so much better. So I don't want to take anything away from him. Left hand, right hand around the basket. His shiftiness has improved even with all his size. Now that's the problem where Kofi needs to continue to grow. I thought if Kofi would have made quicker moves, he would have been better.
With the ball, you mean, or defensively?
Offensively.
Okay.
I thought he would have done a lot better offensively if he didn't just try to, what he does to everybody else is pound and pound and pound and pound and pound and then try to finish. One hit, one spin move, get to the basket. Something a little bit more nimbler, because you're not the same as Edey couldn't push him down. You're not going to be able to push Edey down as well. It's just, the size is too big. So you got to be able to do different things. And where Edey got the best of Kofi is he was able to make 1 or 2 contacts and then spin off of him, which would allow him to use his size and strength to the basket. Kofi never got to that point where he could make, a couple hard bumps and then spin off and get to the basket. And another thing I thought that Purdue did really well was Edey received help. When Kofi would go to spin, there was always someone there to help. We were so concerned about their shooters as they were about ours. We never helped on that spin, and a couple of times, if you look at how Benjamin Bosman-Verdonk defended him, I thought Benjamin did a great job. When he would take those hard dribbles and try to back Benjamin down, as soon as he would pick the ball up to make a move, Benjamin got right back into his space, which didn't allow him to step around or do any of those other things. So I think those things can be corrected. We're not going to run into too many Edeys for the rest of the year, one more time against him, but we're not going to run into very many players at any point like him.
Something that's come up lately, and when we talk about this, is how important, in your view, is the Big Ten championship compared to the NCAA tournament? I'm going to give you the answer a man gave me last night. I said, what would you think about winning the Big Ten championship? He said, that would be nice. Like, well, that'd be nice, but it isn't near as important as the tournament.
Well,
that's what he was saying.
I'll say this: winning the Big Ten championship is only trumped by winning an NCAA championship. And winning an NCAA championship is, there's so many variables that you just have no control.
Odds are against you on the NCAA.
Exactly. So with the odds being against you, you better go out and get that Big Ten championship. I mean, at least gives you a reprieve to the season. But I agree, it would be nice. It would be great to win an NCAA championship. I mean, but I think we watched the two best teams the other night play, even though Wisconsin is really, really good. And they play Wisconsin basketball. They play Badger Bowl, and they're doing a really good job at it. But LT, I want to switch back before we move on to a couple of the topics that was going on today. You mentioned, and I just want to get your opinion on it as quickly or as slowly as you would like to. We talked about the slush fund. You mentioned it. Now we have the NIL. Wherein lies the difference?
Oh, well, the difference is that it's legal. The difference is the difference is this: the slush fund was money that the university coaches collected to pay players. Okay, the NIL is not. The university has nothing to do with the money. This can come from corporations. This can come from signing autographs. There's a 10 or 12 different ways that you can make money. But none of it comes from the university specifically, none from the coaches. I mean, that's the difference. And the biggest problem with the NIL I see is the fact that you're not supposed to use it to influence people to attend. And that's exactly what it's being used for. Recruiting. Yeah. That's illegal. I mean, it's enticement. Here, I'm going to give you such and such if you'll come to the University of Illinois. If you do that, it's illegal. But who's going to catch you? I mean, if you and I have, if I'm recruiting you and I secretly tell you that I've got so much, I've got some deals for you when you get there, NIL deals. We've already seen that. For instance, and I can't remember the school. All the offensive linemen at the school get an X amount of dollars. Well, let's go back to tennis at Ohio State. Each player gets $25,000. They get $25,000 this year. They'll get $25,000 next year. They can't promise that next year legally, but we know that's what they're going to do. So if I'm Illinois and I'm recruiting against Ohio State for a player, his statement is, "Where's my $25,000 if I come to Illinois?" Because I'm getting $25,000 if I go to Ohio State. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, that's just one little tiny example. We see a quarterback from Alabama. We're seeing quarterbacks get $1 million and never play a down. Yeah, because that kid hadn't even touched the field yet. He's playing behind Bryce Young. I don't. But the slush fund was not something that. First of all, the Illinois coaches went to Purdue to find out how to do it. Okay. And so when Illinois got caught, some other schools in the Big Ten ceased to do what they were doing once they saw what was happening. But Illinois was this was an investigation by the Big Ten, by the way. This was a Big Ten. This is something that took place within the conference. And of course, Illinois was severely penalized and lost the coaches that I mentioned. Right. Let me just a real quick story. When this thing was going on, and I didn't know what was happening. They announced that. They didn't announce. We knew privately that Pete Elliott was going to resign as football coach and become the athletic director, and his assistant Bill Taylor would be the new head football coach at the University of Illinois. And I am walking into the assembly. I have a meeting at Pete's house that night, and he's going to tell the media that what's taking place. And I'm walking in the assembly hall, and Charlie Bellotti, who was the SID at the time, Sports Information Director, was walking across walking toward his car, crying.
Oh, wow.
I could see he was crying, and I walked up to Charlie and I said, "Charlie, what's wrong?" He says, "You'll find out tonight." He wouldn't tell me. Got in his car and drove away. And then that night we found out that what had happened, and that boy, you can't imagine how popular Pete and Harry were. Pete Elliott and Harry Combs were they were the most popular guys in town. Everybody loved them. And all of a sudden they're out of a job because of money that had been improperly spent. There were three funds. There was the athletic director fund, the basketball fund, and the football fund. And the funds didn't amount to a few $1,000s, maybe $25,000 or $30,000 total. And yet
wow.
that was, in that time, that was a lot of money, I guess. And so we lost. Callie Pender was a player that we would have had. I mean, we lost three members of the basketball team were banned. Rich Jones, and he was a tremendous player. He would have been all Big Ten, and he was lost for that season. And the team lost three starters. Steve Kaburski played years in the NBA, and he never got to play for Illinois. I mean, after that sophomore year. And it happened in December. We found out about it in Chicago in December, and then within a few months, players were gone.
Wow. Well, that's always strange because others were doing it. I mean,
it was under the table. It was improper.
I guess it was just the way things were happening that were a little off keel.
Well, sure. And the reason that it happened is because the assistant athletic director became upset when he found out that Pete Elliott was going to be the athletic director. He thought he should be this is Mel Brewer, and Mel took he was the keeper of the funds. He was the keeper of the report. He had all the material. He kept the numbers. He had a book. He took the book and gave it to the president.
Wow.
So the president didn't have any choice but to turn it into the Big Ten, because he didn't know what else Brewer might have had a duplicate copy. He couldn't cover up on it. I mean, right. he had to report it. Not that he wouldn't have anyway. I think he was an honest man. I mean, but once he turned that in, the coaches were dead.
Well, that was the past, and now we're in the present. What do you think about?
Oh, that's a long time ago.
Oh yeah, that was a very, very long time ago. I met a guy that just the other day, he was telling me about the slush fund, and that was back during his time. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, yeah, I wasn't even thought of. My mother wasn't even born then. But we got the past into the present.
Yeah, how do you fall of 66.
What do you think about the job Underwood has done so far?
Oh, Underwood's a tremendous coach. I mean, he's doing a great job. He's got the recruiting going. He's got he's good on the court. I think he's an ideal coach.
Yes,
I'm very high on Underwood. I've from the beginning, but he's even better than I thought he would be.
Well, I'll tell you this: I didn't know when I heard the hire, I did have to go and look. I'm like, Brad Underwood.
Yeah.
And so, Frank Martin, of course, who he worked for, is a good friend of mine. I know Frank from way when I was living in Miami. That's how long and how far we go back. And because he was living there at the time. So I called him. I'm like, Coach, I was like, what can you tell me about Brad Underwood? First thing he said, he was like, Deon, you're going to love him. He's like, you're going to love him. He's like, you don't just have one of the best people. He was like, you got one of the best coaches in the country. He's like, you and the University of Illinois are going to love Brad Underwood. And he was right. I think he has done a tremendous job in turning around, as you said, a program that we were struggling for about, a good 7-8 years there. We were struggling real bad.
Illinois got to be in the NCAA tournament every year.
Yes.
In the last 2.5 years, if you look at the record in the Big Ten, I think we've had like 31 or 32 victories, and nobody else is close.
Yep. I
mean, Michigan State, Wisconsin, I guess, is now the second best team, and they're in the 20s, they're high 20s, but Illinois is way ahead of everybody else, and Illinois is just winning more games and
Yeah, I think we were talking about that on the radio, and I think Brian quoted the record, and we've lost very few games, and we're well over 30 wins during
we
this
had won 20 out of 21 Big Ten games against Big Ten teams. Yeah. 20 of 21 and to end of the Purdue game. Now it's 20 of 22.
Yeah, and that's impressive. I mean, because the thing is, you've been in this long enough. You want to defend your conference and do what you can do on your home court and then go and win on the road. And Brad has won on the road, which is even more impressive in the Big Ten.
Yeah, he has. But one thing I will say about this team, they haven't beaten anybody that's ranked yet. They haven't beaten a ranked team yet. You got to do that. Yes. And they'll get a chance against Michigan State next Tuesday, but we can't go. I'm not looking past Friday, but you got to beat Maryland, and then you got to come back and at least beat one ranked team. And because so far, we've looked pretty good against the average teams. But if you go back and analyze the teams, Missouri and Notre Dame and some of the other teams that Illinois beaten this year, they are down. They really are down. I mean, Missouri is really down. And they won a good game the other day, but I'm just saying they're down. They're all over their coach. And by the way, what's it like to play a Maryland team that had a coaching change already? How's that affected the team? It hadn't helped them, I know.
Well, I don't think it's helped them. You know what? I take that back. Watching Maryland under Turgeon, I thought they didn't play very hard for him, which was kind of sad because they got some good players, and I thought they would have played harder for him. They're playing hard for Danny Manning. Now, are they winning most of those games? No, but you see I think he's lifted the morale a little bit. But I don't know. I think on their home court, this is going to be a tough game for us. We're going to have to come out, like you said, handle business and really put our foot down coming, and not look past Maryland, looking at Michigan State. And I hope that doesn't happen because I think that's what took place in that Nebraska game, which we ended up winning by 10, but that was an ugly game.
Oh, yeah.
And then Michigan came and mucked it up and made it nasty, made it ugly, and made it dirty. The good thing is we still won by 15. And that's what good teams do. They win ugly, nasty, stinky games.
Well, we closed those games out. We closed those games out. And actually, we came on pretty strong against Purdue, considering how far we were behind.
Yes.
But
I'm not one to blame stuff on the referees, but you take away one or two terrible calls in there, it's a different outcome.
Every time they showed a replay, they showed they were wrong.
Yes.
I should say every time. Several times when they showed the replay, it was clear that Illinois got the bad end of the call.
And I'll tell you, LT, I told Brian before the game even started, I looked and I saw who the refs were. I said, Brian, we're in trouble. We're going to have to play great. He was like, you think? I said, yeah. I said, we're going to have to play great. I personally, I have nothing against DJ. I have nothing against Bo Borowski. If you go back and look at it, just not very far when they're not very fair when the other orange and blue team is playing.
It would be possible as a writer, and I saw this done many, many years ago by a guy named Gordon Graham, who wrote Graham Crackers for the Lafayette paper.
I like that.
And he would hit the officials so hard in his column, and he would be on, and you could do that. There's never a close game that couldn't have gone the other way if officiate. The game can't be officiated, okay? It's physically, humanly impossible to officiate.
Yeah.
But people have to do it, and that's why. And I was bad in the beginning. I would always be complaining about the officials, and I just at some point I reached the realization you could do it every game. Let's get off that, And so I try not to do it. And we talk about it today, like, well. Matter of factly, I think they missed some calls, but I'm not, raging about it. By the way, I think that we had some of the people that are in charge of officiating for the Big Ten at that game, so they would know what happened.
Well, as a player, as a coach, now as a journalist, like you. I mean, you look at it, you try to be subjective because it's a hard job. But and this is what I told Brian. For example, the one Kofi foul when Kofi fell on the floor and
Oh,
Edie kind of fell over him. There was no reason for Bo to call that foul.
you
Edie
just
had tossed, he had thrown the
tell the
ball.
guys to get up and play ball.
Yeah, he had passed the ball. So it wasn't like it caused him to travel or he took his legs from up under. There was no reason to call that. All right, let's play on and keep it going. But you call that call, and then immediately on the other side, when there is a real call, which that was a foul on the other end with the hip check on Ivy. But now this kid has 4 fouls and he's out of the game. And you have just taken away what every single person, whether they were in the stadium or watching that game on television, wanted to see, which were the big guys going against each other and both of these teams at their full strength going against one another. And as a referee, you should not be affecting the game in that manner. Is the way I look at it. And that's
Too many games are impacted by fouls. That's why I think they should have 6 fouls.
Yeah, I would like that.
But I know that that was attempted many years ago, and it's been turned down, and it's not going to happen. But I just hate to see guys out of the game with 2 fouls so early, and it happens all the time.
Yeah,
both sides, just players get 2 fouls, coach take them out. Seldom put them back in, although on occasion Underwood will put a player back in with 2 fouls, but he's not going to put Kofi back in with 2 fouls, I don't think, unless the game gets out of hand. He did, by the way, put him back in with 4 minutes, but as the game progressed, there were several situations where he tried to take him out when we were on defense and then put him back in when we were on offense. He tried to do that. He was trying to save him, but Illinois don't look for Illinois to have Illinois needs him in the games, and when he's not, it's going to be tough.
Very true. Very true. Well, LT, I always like to do this, which is give the last minute to my guests. So the last minute belongs to you. Whatever you want to say to Illini Nation, the mic is yours, big guy.
Well, I don't have anything saved up that I want to say, but I think we should understand that this is a special period that we're going through here. I mean, we've been through enough bad times. We got to appreciate the good times. This is the good times. I don't know if Illinois is going to win the Big Ten championship, but I think it's worthwhile battling for. And I go back, to an era when the Big Ten championship was really crucial. When the first NCAA tournament I ever went to, Deon, was at Northwestern.
Oh wow!
It was the 4 teams there. Iowa was there, and San Francisco was there with Bill Russell, and that was the first NCAA tournament game I ever saw. That was back in the 50s, and I can tell you, it's come a long way since then. The NCAA tournament is now played in a football stadium or someplace where they can get 80,000 people in there, and but I still think the Big Ten it's more than just nice. I was so, well, be nice to win. Well, it's more than that. And I think when you battle over 3 months of a season, and now we got early games in December, and and we got to go all the way to March, and I think this tells you who the best team is. The NCAA tournament tells you who's best at that time, or who's luckiest at that time, and whose center didn't get in foul trouble, or and
who stayed healthy. Yeah.
And the problem with the NCAA tournament is that if this is your goal, you're going to be disappointed most of the time. And for Illinois, you're disappointed all the time.
Yeah. Well, LT, I appreciate it. We have to do this again. This again. I mean, I want to continue to pick your brain. Also, I have to ask, because I have a new sponsor that came on, and he sponsored T-shirts for me for Champagne on Ice. I need to know your shirt size, LT, so I can bring you a shirt.
Well, I guess medium to large. I mean, either one. I can wear either one.
Got you. And I am going to bring you that shirt. And I just asked one thing, because I know you got at Tate Lines on Twitter. Take a picture of it for me and show me some love. Just tag Champagne on Ice and tag Deon in it. Then I have a gift for you, which I have to get out to my other guests as well. So that anybody that's listening to this, your T-shirt is coming as well. I just got them hot off the presses
Deon,
a couple of days ago.
it's amazing to me how you've turned out. You know why? You were such a quiet guy when you came here. You know, you sat out that first year. You were kind of in hibernation. Remember that? You spent a year in hibernation, and look at you now.
Oh, yeah, I'm just trying to do what I was taught to do, LT. Trying to represent well, that's all.
You certainly turned out well.
Well, I appreciate it. So, Illini Nation, we're going to close out this edition of Champagne on Ice with the great Loren Tate. And as I mentioned, you can follow him on Twitter at Tate Lines. As you know, or you can find him anywhere. You know, he's in the State Farm Center all the time, sitting right there next to me and Brian. So, Loren Tate, I appreciate you. And this is Champagne on Ice. As I said, we're going to close out thanks to the Field of 68 Media, as well as my partners over at Bet River Sportsbook. Without you guys, Champagne on Ice is not possible. So thank you very much and keep going. Go Illini.
Thanks, Deon.